In the first reading today, we heard the Israelites at one of their many stop and complain moments. They were hot, hungry, tired, and thirsty. They were afraid, angry, and just that close to being in despair. And theirs is a desperate question. It wasn't just a matter of their being thirsty, although that certainly is what brought the question to mind. It was ultimately for them a question of faith, a desperate cry of a people who did not trust God nor believe in Moses, his representative. And so they asked, is the Lord in our midst or not? Is the Lord with us or not? As we're told, they called that place Meribah and Massah, Hebrew words that mean quarreling and putting to the test. That's the place where they quarreled with God. That's the place where they put the Lord to the test. In a way, it's easy for us to answer their question for them. Of course the Lord is in their midst. The Lord is always in our midst. Just watch and see. But let the other story, the story of the woman at the well, explain to us how their story and how her story are really our stories. The Samaritan woman at the well has her own questions and her own thirst. We don't know how she got that way, although the story gives some hints as we go along. Her situation has left her with her own fear, mistrust, anger, and despair. She doesn't ask it directly, but really her question is the same. Is the Lord here or not? Where can I find the Lord? To respond to her question, Jesus has to meet her where she is, in a sense. Notice how by the end of the story her thirst is quenched, although she never drank a drop of water from the well. In fact, she leaves her water jar there. Her faith comes slowly, but eventually she gets it. Is the Lord in our midst or not? I who speak to you am He, Jesus said. We've all been there. We've all done that. We know what those stop and complain moments are like. We can relate to the Israelites in the wilderness. We've quarreled with God too. We have put the Lord to the test. Where are you? Why is this happening? Lord, why don't you do something about this? Sometimes we look around and it seems so dry. Everything seems to point to disaster. In truth, our stop and complain moments are rarely about not having water, but they are about being thirsty. Our complaints are usually about family and community, about our world, sometimes about the church, sometimes about our lives personally. There are feelings of rejection, feelings of irritation, feelings of loneliness. There is violence, there's fear, there's despair, all those things going on in us all the time. And maybe you can't pinpoint it exactly, but you know that sometimes you're very thirsty. So, is the Lord in our midst or not? God welcomes the question, really. Notice how in the story of Moses in the first reading today, it is Moses who's offended by the question, not the Lord. God welcomes the question. And you can remember times when God did come through for you, when God did provide, maybe even in a surprising way, a water from the rock kind of way. God welcomes the challenge of proving himself to you again. But to get to the water that God is offering, to have the Lord quench our thirst, we must follow the way that he directs in the readings today. First of all, it requires trust, as he said to Moses, go, stand in front of the people. It requires facing your own sin and guilt, like the woman at the well. It requires sometimes leaving your water jar behind, not living in the past, not boxing yourself in. It requires striking the rock, confronting the very thing that holds you back, facing your fear, your guilt, anger, mistrust, sadness, illness, whatever it is that your dry rock is made up of. The promise of God, if you do all that, I'll be standing right there in front of you. During this season of Lent, we ask the Lord to quench our thirst, to fill up our emptiness, and to take away the things that separate us from Him, the things that drive us farther from God. We, during the season of Lent, strive to grow closer to the Lord and have Him quench our thirst.